Hi everybody. Welcome to Genuine Faith. My name is Tulumango. I think I'm gonna start saying my full name from now on. My name is Tulumango. welcome. As you can see by the title of the video, this topic that I want to do is, why the Sabbath is not optional. So there's sort of like two groups of Christians. Well, maybe not two, but there's like two main arguments that people use to reject the Sabbath. One is that they, utterly, refuse to admit or, accept the truth, the clear biblical truth, no matter how many, verses, and no matter the pleadings of the Holy Spirit. They just refuse to believe that, the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord, that it is a memorial of His creation, that it begins from Friday sunset to Saturday sunset. They just refuse. And then there's other people who say, well, I can see that, the true Sabbath, the biblical Sabbath, is from Friday sunset to Saturday sunset, um, but it was nailed to the cross, and or I can do Tuesday. I mean, a day doesn't really matter to God, does it? And so there's those like type of people. Well, and I just wanted to maybe study that a bit further and just look at the Bible, why the Sabbath is not really, an option. So I have three reasons. The first reason is that God made the Sabbath. It's a part of His creation. It is a memorial of His creation. So I cannot make my own Sabbath. I cannot say, oh, okay, well, God's Sabbath is from Friday sunset to Saturday sunset, but I'm gonna make my Sabbath on a Monday, and God will just have to accept that because that's my schedule. Um, that's just not a very obedient, approach or way of, looking at anything. That if God says this, well, I'm just gonna do this, and God's gonna have to accept it. It's a bit similar to how people will say, okay, well, God created marriage to be a union between an adult man and an adult woman, um, but I am going to choose, as a female, to marry another female, and God's just going to have to accept that. God's just going to have to bless us. God cannot bless something profane. God cannot bless something that He did not create. So, if we look at Genesis chapter 2, verse 1 to 3, it reads as follows. Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them. And on the seventh day God ended His work which He had made, and He rested on the seventh day from all His work which He had made. And God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because that in it He had rested from all His work which God created and made. So before sin, this is before sin. This is God at the very beginning, creating man. So the seventh day Sabbath is really a part of creation. If you want to rule out the truth of the Sabbath, you basically want to erase the truth of creation, that God created the world, and then He, created um, in 7 or in 6 literal days. He created everything that Genesis, accounts for, and on the seventh day He rested. So if you want to, do away with one day, for example, if you want to say, oh well, on the fourth day God didn't create the sun, the moon, and the stars, then you have no reason to believe that He created anything else. You have no reason to believe that He created the land animals and the sea animals on their various days. So really, this also refutes the fact that it's in Genesis, it's at the very, beginning of the account of creation, refutes any ideas that people have that, oh, well, it was, one of the shadow of things to come. Do you believe that creation is a shadow of things to come? The shadow of things to come happens after the fall, after Adam and Eve have sinned, and then God institutes a plan of, of redemption, pointing towards Jesus, who would be the ultimate sacrifice. He gives them temporary sacrifices through animals, and everything that was surrounding that ceremonies was the shadow of things to come. It was a type, really. It was an example of what Jesus would do. But in creation, when everything was perfect and there was no fall, God's creation was not a shadow of things to come. So that is the first reason, that the Sabbath is not optional, because God says so. Thus saith the Lord. The second reason is that it's a commandment. It's not a suggestion. God does not say, "Oh well, you may, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy." Oh well, yeah, it would be a good idea, if 6 days you labored and seventh you shall rest. No, God says you shall keep the Sabbath. If we read Exodus chapter 20, verse 8 to 11, it says, "Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do any work, thou, nor thy son, nor thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is within thy gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that in them is, and rested the seventh day. Wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it." So Exodus is quoting here from Genesis chapter 2, where it says God in 6 days, created the heaven and earth, and then on the seventh day he rested, hallowed and blessed the seventh day. If God sanctifies something, he sets it apart. He sets it apart as holy. And that is the whole point of the Sabbath. It's the sanctity in it. If you choose to rest on a Tuesday, that's fine. You can take an off day on a Tuesday, but it is not sanctified. It is not set apart. If something is set apart, it is set apart from the rest. It is different from the rest. So the seventh day is different from the rest of the other days from creation. So if God didn't make heaven and earth and bless the seventh day, then it wouldn't be a Sabbath day. But because God made heaven and earth and blessed the seventh day, then it is blessed. And that's why we should also, follow God's commandments and keep the Sabbath day. I really wish I had the words to encourage, especially fellow Christians, people who already believe in the sovereignty and the supremacy of God in their lives, who believe that God created them. Well, if you do believe that God created you, then you should consider these verses and, understand that when God created you, He instituted a memorial for you to rest on the seventh day. Okay, so also the other part about it being a commandment is that it's actually an issue of morality. It's part of all the 10 commandments, which are, moral commandments. So they are moral laws. Thou shalt not kill. There is something wrong with killing. Thou shalt not, bear false witness against your neighbor. There is something wrong with lying and, having a false witness, sharing false testimonies. There is something morally wrong. Honor your father and your mother. That is a morally good thing to do. So is remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. If you think that somebody who murders, somebody who fornicates, somebody who commits adultery is immoral, then the same applies for somebody who willfully does not, observe the Sabbath. That person is immoral, really. And it's crazy because in our world, we don't look at, rest as something so important that a person who refuses to rest will be immoral. But in God's order of things, it's immoral. God created us, created the system for our own benefit. And we'll get to that in just a bit in my third point, the part of it being for our benefit. But God actually commands us to work 6 days and take a break on the seventh. But because we live in such a toxic, society in this industrialization, modern industrialization. It's all about work, 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 and never rest. And a leave is 2 weeks per year, but then every other day you're supposed to be overworking yourself until you burn out. Things like burnouts shouldn't even be a topic if we were all sticking to God's commandments, resting every seventh day like he told us to do. It also includes following the normal day and night cycles. All of that will be so beneficial to us. But it's just like Ecclesiastes puts it, God created man righteous, but man has devised many plans to sin and for his own detriment. So, the third point of why the Sabbath is not optional is because the Sabbath was made for man. Luke chapter 6, verse 5. And he said unto them, that's Jesus speaking, and he said unto them that the Son of Man is Lord also of the Sabbath. So, if we look at that, then it also goes on then to continue to say that the Sabbath was made for man. So that's why in Isaiah 56, when it prophesies about God's gospel going to the Gentiles, not only being limited to the Israelites, um, you know, then it also speaks about the Sabbath. Let's read Isaiah 56, verse 4, 5, and 6. For thus saith the Lord unto the eunuchs that keep my Sabbaths, and choose the things that please me. Come on, people. um I haven't heard, the only other time I've heard of things that please God is when God speaks about faith in Hebrews. For without faith it is impossible to please God. And here is God speaking again about something that pleases him. For thus saith the Lord unto the eunuchs that keep my Sabbaths, and choose the things that please me, and take hold of my covenant. The word covenant is there. Sabbaths, covenant in one verse. Even unto them will I give in mine house and within my walls a place and a name better than of sons and of daughters. Which reminds me of, in the New Testament, 1 John chapter 3, verse 1. Behold, you know, what manner of love that the Father has bestowed on us, that we should be called sons and daughters. And in here it's saying God's going to give a place to people that were not before counted as sons and daughters. God's going to give them a place better than sons and daughters. I will give them an everlasting name that shall not be cut off. Also, the sons of the stranger that join themselves to the Lord, to serve him and to love the name of the Lord, to be his servants. Everyone that keepeth the Sabbath from polluting it, and taketh hold of my covenant, Sabbath covenant, even them will I bring to my holy mountain, and make them joyful in my house of prayer. Their burnt offerings and their sacrifices shall be accepted upon mine altar. For mine house shall be called an house of prayer for all people. That's an interesting part in that verse that we've just read. Of course, it talks about burnt sacrifices because even before the coming of Jesus, there were strangers or, foreigners, people, Gentiles, people who are not Israelites, who joined themselves to the Israelites and they were accepted even then. But here it's obviously prophesying of, the time when Jesus will be there, because it says, my house shall be called a house of prayer for all people. And it's really, we shouldn't run away with the burnt offerings thing here, but it also just, the whole context of it, if you read it, it's really pointing towards the time when the gospel will be you know um extended to everybody, not only the Israelites. So when he talks about burnt offerings and sacrifices, it just basically means worship. God will accept the worship of Gentiles. Why? Because they choose things that please him. Not just because, they're Gentiles. Also, the Israelites were chosen, but hey, not every single one of them pleased God. If you remember in the desert, so many of them were died and were killed because of their disobedience and rebellion towards God. So God is saying, whoever's not rebellious towards me, whoever chooses the things that I love and takes hold of my covenant and keeps my Sabbath, those people I will give a place better than of sons and daughters. Let's also look at Isaiah chapter 66, verse 22 and 23. It says, For as the new heavens and the new earth, which I will make, shall remain before me, saith the Lord, so shall your seed and your name remain. And it shall come to pass that from one new moon to another, and from one Sabbath to another, shall all flesh come to worship before me, saith the Lord. All flesh, all people, you know, worshiping God in the new earth. This is a prophecy that in the new earth, all people will come before God. Again, it's reiterating the fact that my house shall be called a house of prayer for all people. So all people will come to worship God in the new earth. And they will be worshiping God at what time markers? From one new moon to another, which just basically means from one month to another, and from one Sabbath to another. So the Sabbath from the beginning of creation was a time marker. Each week is, marked by 7 days. The seventh being the blessed day of the Lord, which is Friday sunset to Saturday sunset. So if we are still going to be worshiping God in this manner, still acknowledging this time markers, still acknowledging the memorial of his creation in the new earth, why would we not be doing it right now in this current life, in this current earth? So this is another reason why the Sabbath is not optional. It is something that is made for man. It's made for us as long as we will exist, even in the future life. The fourth point why the Sabbath is not an option is because it is part of true religion. It's part of what defines true religion. James chapter 1 verse 27 says, pure religion before God and the Father is this, to visit the fatherless and widows in their affliction, and to keep himself unspotted from the world. Let's look at Isaiah 58. Cry aloud and spare not, lift up thy voice like a trumpet, and shew my people their transgression, and the house of Jacob their sins. Yet they seek me daily, and delight to know my ways, as a nation that did righteousness, and forsook not the ordinance of their God. They ask of me the ordinances of justice. They take delight in approaching to God. So isn't this like all Christians nowadays? Everybody wants to be part of the kingdom. Everybody wants to be saved, and people delight in seeking God as if they have not forsaken, the ordinances of God. And not that we have to keep the ordinances of the ceremonial law, no, but here's what God wants us to keep. Verse 3, wherefore have we fasted, say they, and thou seest not? Wherefore have we afflicted our soul, and thou takest no knowledge? Behold, in the day of your fast ye find pleasure, and exact all your labors. Behold, ye fast for strife and debate, and to smite with the fist of wickedness. Ye shall not fast as ye do this day, to make your voice to be heard on high. Is it such a fast that I have chosen? A day for a man to afflict his soul? Is it to bow down his head as a bulrush, and to spread sackcloth and ashes under him? Wilt thou call this a fast and an acceptable day to the Lord? Is not this the fast that I have chosen? Remember James 1 verse 27 now. To loose the bands of wickedness, to undo the heavy burdens, and to let the oppressed go free, and that he break every yoke. Is it not to deal thy bread to the hungry, and that thou bring the poor that are cast out to thy house? When thou seest thy naked, that thou cover him, and that thou hide not thyself from thine own flesh. So it's talking about people who are in affliction here. It's talking about visiting people who are in prison. It's talking about breaking every yoke, freeing the oppressed, giving bread to the hungry. And God again reiterates this in James 1 verse 27, says this is true religion, visiting the afflicted, the fatherless and afflicted, in their affliction, and keeping yourself unspotted from the world. It goes on then, it says, verse 8, then shall thy light break forth as the morning, and thine health shall spring forth speedily, and thy righteousness shall go before thee. The glory of the Lord shall be thy reward. Then thou shalt call, and the Lord shall answer. Thou shalt cry, and he shall say, Here I am. If thou take away from the midst of thee the yoke, the putting forth of the finger, and speaking vanity, and if thou draw out thy soul to the hungry, and satisfy the afflicted soul, the word affliction, just like in James 1 verse 27, this is pure religion. It's still going on to describe pure and undefiled religion. Then shall thy light rise in obscurity, and thy darkness be as the noonday. And the Lord shall guide thee continually, and satisfy thy soul in drought, and make fat thy bones, and thou shalt be like a watered garden, and like a spring of water, whose waters fail not. And they that shall be of thee shall build the old waste places. Thou shalt raise up the foundations of many generations, and thou shalt be called the repairer of the breach, the restorer of paths to dwell in. If, on condition of what? If thou turn away thy foot from the Sabbath, from doing thy pleasure on my holy day, and call the Sabbath a delight, the holy of the Lord, honorable, and shalt honor him, not doing thine own ways, nor finding thine own pleasure, nor speaking thine own words, then thou shalt delight thyself in the Lord, and I will cause thee to ride upon the high places of the earth, and feed thee with the heritage of Jacob thy father, for the mouth of the Lord hath spoken it. So we find a similar language here. God is saying, okay, people of Israel, you like fasting, because they did this whole demonstration where they didn't wear their normal clothes, they wore sackcloth, they covered themselves with ashes, and they fasted. But God is saying, this is not the type of fast that I want. I want a fast whereby you take this, time to visit those who are afflicted. You take the time to actually give bread to the hungry. So God is saying this is what delights him. In the same way as in James 1 verse 27, God saying pure and undefiled religion is you taking the time to visit the afflicted. So in all of this, and in Isaiah chapter 58, what God is also requiring in true religion is to keep your foot away from defiling the Sabbath. So the Sabbath is still important to God even today. Okay, so those are the four, not three, four reasons why, through a study of the Bible, I have, convicted that the Sabbath is not optional. But as always, thank you for, tuning in. Thank you for listening to this video. And if you are a Christian and this is something new to you, please pray about it. And I am pretty sure that, the Lord Jesus himself will help you in your journey. Let's also engage, please, Bitanana. If you have any questions or you have anything to add, that might enlighten all of us, please feel free to comment in the comment section. Yeah, until then, like, share, subscribe. I will see you in the next video. Bye.